Hi, I'm Moira Sheehan, and I'm the Director of Breeding Insight. And today I'm going to be talking about building breeding support for USDA-ARS horticultural crops. So breeders have a number of challenges to get to where they can release newer and better varieties faster. And unlike most of the annual or major crops, horticultural crops face additional challenges. In terms of logistical challenges, they're running with a small budget, a small workforce. Generally, it's temporary, a lot of temporary labor. And by its very nature, the crops are more labor intensive in their management and production. In terms of technical challenges, new tech is really hard for a small program to adopt. They don't know where to start. They're not sure if it's the right technology to meet their needs. They have no idea if the maintenance cost is something they can afford, and they're not really always sure how it's going to fit into their workflow. Environmental affects everybody, and the droughts, floods, seasonal fluctuations, and climate change are affecting all breeders globally. However, if you're not breeding for an annual crop, you have to be thinking much further ahead and need a bigger source of genetic diversity to combat the things that are coming, because you're always breeding a couple of years behind what's actually happening right now. And lastly, horticultural crops have a lot of biological issues. So they may have a really complex genome. May have a longer life cycle, a biennial or perennial life cycle. A lot of self-incompatibility may still exist, and they may even have separate genders. And the biggest problem is really the time to maturity. So it takes 5 to 6 years for a citrus plant to actually produce fruit. So you're always working behind the clock. And when I think about breeding programs, I think about three different types. And the first type is phenotypic selection, where breeder knowledge is far more important to the decision process than genetics. In this case, breeding is done by eye, and it takes a lot of time to perfect that breeder's art. It relies on very high numbers where you're putting out thousands of individuals and culling down to maybe a few thousand for advancement. And this is very effective. It's how most breeding has been done for generations and years. If you think about dogs or cats or any other kind of species where phenotypic breeding is happening, and it is really easy to adopt. It's very easy to get started. You could do it in your garden at home, but it takes years to really perfect. And so in terms of some examples, citrus, blueberry, cranberry, and again, most horticultural crops fall into this category. The next step up is marker-assisted selection, where breeders' knowledge is still critical and central to decision making, but it's being supplemented with information from genetics. And this is typically done for resistance genes or other kinds of key digestibility genes, where you want to be able to screen very early in your populations the things that do not have the markers that you care about for a release variety. And it does require you having markers that are distributed genome-wide, and it does require that you understand the relationship of those markers to your genes of interest. And so when a breeder considers moving from phenotypic selection to marker-assisted selection, there are real barriers to entry for those breeders who want to adopt that technology. And it's the culmination of all the logistical, technical, and biological challenges that are preventing technology adoption or program growth. And the last stage is genomic selection, where the breeder's knowledge is still important, but it's superseded by the genetic information. So the breeder knowledge is typically used more towards the end of the breeding program when it comes time to make a selection between a couple of different cultivars as to what would be released. And genetics is really helping to streamline the program much earlier in the breeding cycle. And genomic selection requires both high quality phenotypic data for the traits of interest and genome-wide genotyping of individuals in your population. Again, when a breeder decides they want to move to more genomic selection to get more efficiency in their program, there are new barriers to entry that hamper that transition. And we get the question from a lot of our phenotypic breeders, why do I need to add genomics? And it really comes down to that sequencing technology is accessible and affordable for all species. And breeders have a lot of information they have to collect, assimilate, and act upon in very short windows of time with fixed constraints. And breeders don't get to see if they were right until it's too late to change course. So, by supplementing the breeder's eye with genomic data analytics and prediction models, we can free breeders from a lot of this grunt work and reduce the uncertainty while still staying within the program's constraints. Really want to make sure that the breeders get to do more breeding. So, we need to understand what a breeder needs to make good progress. They need to manage their breeding program, have their data all in one place. They need to have tools that help them collect data in the field. They need to manage and store that trait data, and they need to manage samples that they're collecting, whether it's leaf tissue for DNA extraction or it's post-harvest analysis. They want to have access to what's in the USDA germplasm banks, as that's the primary place they're going to go for new native traits and pre-breeding activities. They need to be able to store and retrieve genetic data and bring that data along with the trait data together to produce these genomic analyses to help make improved decisions and to also do better reporting. So at Breeding Insight, we are here piloting with 6 USDA specialty breeding programs, and we start by getting to know the programs and listening to them about what their wants and needs are. We provide resources by making connections to getting them genotypic platforms, to providing vendors to help them keep the costs down. We help them manage that data. We also help them manage and accumulate phenotypic data of higher quality, and we provide breeding support and consultation. So we're here as their partner in their technology adoption journey. And we also help deliver software, and we're working in a public sphere, so we are creating open source software, and we're not looking to reinvent the wheel, so we look at what's available, and then we decide what functionality is not already available that needs to be there for our breeder specific use cases, and then we create software to meet those gaps. And in order to make a holistic system, we need to have seamless back-end communication so that data is moving from one software component to another without the need for manual transfer. And we need to have an overlay of a UI that looks really breeder friendly and meets the needs of each individual breeding program. So one thing we found by talking to our breeders is that no matter what you're breeding for, whether it be fish or alfalfa, that your breeders are following a 12-month breeding cycle. And that means that things that are happening in one part of the cycle are not happening in another. So to help us understand that, we broke it down into the workflows that are actually happening in time. So breeders are having to manage stocks and pedigrees, perform crosses, and design and manage trials at the beginning of the cycle. They're having to capture phenotypes, whether it's on paper or audio or some mobile device. They're having to evaluate and genotypes and evaluate their phenotypes, all so that they can finally make decisions and selections, whether it's genomic selection or marker-assisted selection, and then finally their annual reports. So Breeding Insight is really dedicated to creating a digital ecosystem where breeders can manage their workflows in time with the cycle and flux of their own program in a calendar year. So our initial platform starts with BreedBase, which has general functionality and we believe is going to be fairly species agnostic. We're partnering with Fieldbook from the PhenoApps suite to do mobile phenotyping on Android devices in the field. We're using GigWa for our backend genomic database storage, and we're underway to connect with Green Global to allow breeders to be able to seamlessly look at what's in the Green Global databases and to request materials. And the way we're connecting these disparate systems is by using the breeding API or the or what we call BRAPI. And that's a communication standard that allows different software to communicate information back and forth between each other without the need for a human to manually transfer data on Excel files. So right now, Breeding Insight is in the pilot phase. And what that means is that it's an ARS initiative aimed at ARS breeders of specialty crop animals and natural resources. And we fall under the national program direction of Tim Reinhardt. And right now we're only breeding for 3 out of about 50 specialty crops, about 2 out of the 15 specialty animals, and only 1 of the natural resource or of the 30 that are available. But we're hoping as we grow and expand this program out that our vision for one Breeding Insight really is to support all the specialty crops plus the national germplasm repositories for pre-breeding activities, all the specialty animals, and any natural resources that are available now or will become breeding crops as we change the scope of what we're breeding for. And in order to do that, we will still be relying on the Breeding Insight Core that's at Cornell, but ARS will be making a commitment to distribute Breeding Insight coordinators area-wide nationally so that they can be more hands-on with the breeders as they adopt technologies. And one of the ways ARS is doing this is by creating an ARS readiness program called BIOn Ramp. And it's for non-specialty crop and animal breeders that wouldn't qualify for Breeding Insight because they're not specialty crops. And it's also for ARS specialty crop and animal breeders that want or need a more extended transition into BI. And this 1 to 2 year commitment really allows them to get their trait ontology set up, to migrate data from paper to digital, to really start organizing their program and making some decisions about how they want to expand and build capacity in their program. And really the story is that together, BI and BIOn Ramp can build better tools for all public breeders because a lot of the same things are needed both in ARS breeding programs as well as in public breeding programs. And because our species are going to be diversified, we're going to be able to build the most species agnostic system when we work together. And with that, I would like to thank my whole entire team. They do the work. I'm just the one getting to do the talking. Our ARS collaborators are fantastic, along with our oversight from our national program leaders at the bottom and our scientific advisory board. We do have a GitHub. All of our software is available freely. You're welcome to go there and download anything that's of interest to you. Thank you.